everyone, and welcome to the Changemakers podcast, where we chat with interesting and engaging individuals here and far about change, making change, living change in their own lives, how they've experienced unimaginable change, and innovative ways people uplift the lives of others. We chat about triumphs over tragedies, mindset matters, and how we live out our life's purpose inspirationally. So please join us to be inspired and empowered to be the change you want to see in this world. You know, we can all be change makers in our lives. Here's to the change you're about to bring forth. And today, I'm so excited to welcome our guest, Alicia Journey, to our show today. And I'm going to let Alicia share a little bit about herself with our listeners. So welcome, Alicia, to the show today.
Thank you. I'm so happy and honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I can share with our listeners that I've learned a little bit about Alicia. I am so excited to learn more about her and her work and how she's bringing so much wonderfulness into the universe with our particularly women lawyers. And I'm going to let her share more about that. But first, let's learn a little bit about Alicia. So share with us, Alicia, a bit about yourself, your professional passion, and a few insights into your professional journey.
Yes, thank you. I am a mother of two. I have a 13 and 7-year-old, and for me, they're my biggest lesson and my biggest passion. I always like to lead with that. They've taught me so much in this journey. But from a professional standpoint, what I do is I like to say I help attorneys transform the way that they treat themselves, their clients, and the law. And I do that through mental health awareness, mindfulness, neuroscience, psychology, self-development. And I really work with burnout, resiliency, and bringing in health and wellness into the practice of law. And really, for me, a lot of this stems from personally from I am an attorney myself. I practice in California. I am a U.S. Supreme Court attorney. I was a prosecutor for years. Did 34 trials, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, all the really tough stuff. And then I opened up my own law firm, and I had 4 associates, 2 paralegals, and an assistant, and I opened up a nonprofit. All the achieving, but in an attempt to break the glass ceiling, but doing it very much in a man's way. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Just keep going. And I didn't listen to the signs and symptoms my body was telling me, which were the symptoms of burnout and compassion fatigue and depression, anxiety, all of the things. And what happened for me was I ended up with uterine cancer, adrenal failure. I had 2 strokes, and I basically was couch bound. And through that process, I really learned what it means to, especially for women in the law, redefining success on our own terms and not trying to do it in the same exact way, in the same model that, we have been shown, because there are so many men in this field. Let's do it in the way that we're so good at, in a collaborative, nurturing way, because that's what the law needs, is this. And so we can do it, but that requires balance, and it requires us to listen to our bodies and incorporate more of the balance into our life, and our intuition on what does our body need. So that's what I do, and it is more than just a paycheck. It's absolutely a mission, especially from the mental health perspective, with our levels of suicide and depression and just our burnout that's happening to our the counselors in our nation. It's very near and dear to my heart.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. You've been through and you've survived a
Yes.
lot. You're quite the warrior. So my hats off to you. You rattle that off, but for a lot of people, that would send them over the edge.
Yes, I feel like now, thankfully, I've done a lot of work around this, and I can speak about it objectively as a story that happened instead of a story that defined me. One of the things that I always talk about is, turn your pain into purpose and your trials into triumph. And I really do believe that that is necessary to do. But sometimes when the stories are too close to you, you can't be objective, about them. But I think that it's a useful tool to be able to frame why this is such an important topic to be talking about right now.
I could not agree with you more. As we've shared before, I've worked in the law firm legal services space for going on 30 years now, and it really does pull at my heartstrings. Women lawyers that I just can't think that they know what they're getting themselves into when they sign up for law school and then go into private practice. Even now, though we have some, I know some real trailblazing women attorneys around the country that are working their heart out to make a difference with gender equality and diversity and such. We have, unfortunately, the legal services community has so far to go to even gaining a level of acceptability, of consideration towards the unique brilliance that women lawyers bring to legal services. And so I'm so excited to hear and am so impressed with, that you've taken your own personal journey and the trials and the triumphs and the grit and the resilience, and now putting that pain into purpose to help the high achieving, women professionals bring their own lives into balance, and how they can avoid burnout and develop more resiliency. So what specifically do you think, I'm curious, that you see that needs attention the most in this landscape?
The more that I dive into this, and not just from obviously my own specific experience, but then I dive into the research, and I'm giving, I do CLE workshops on this, and then I also bring my work into law firms. And what I'm seeing is it's like this perfect soup, this masterful recipe for disaster, right? You've got compassion fatigue, which, I don't know that we talk about enough in the practice of law. It's interesting because, so if you think about it, you're sitting here hearing other people don't come to lawyers because their life is great. They come to lawyers because they're in crisis, emotional crisis, financial crisis, or they're trying to avoid the crisis. And I heard this really good analogy. I think it's super perfect. Think about, as an attorney, you're a surgeon, and their client is laying there on the table, and you're about ready to perform this, life-saving operation, or life-altering operation. Let's make it a little less dramatic. And it's not just you in that operating room. On the other side of it, you've got another surgeon whose job it is to kill your client, right? So it's not just you and they're trying to save your client. It's somebody trying to harm or kill your client. And then there's, if you're a trial attorney, there's 12 people watching it, or, there's people in the room. It's like, you're not only hearing all of everybody's compound traumas and their distress, it's high pressure, high stakes, with an adversary on the other side who has the same pressures and the same agenda, but it's the antithesis. And you put on that a high volume it's almost inhuman, the level of pressure. And then I think the other little recipe in that is that we're held to this ethical standard where you're not allowed to talk about your cases for good reason, obviously. But then where does all of that energy and trauma and compound trauma and stress go if we don't find a way as a profession to move it out of our body through talking and through self-care and through other, I talk about the 4 pillars and your non-negotiables that you need in your life, but the profession itself doesn't lend itself to eating well and exercising and making sure that there's people in your life that you can talk about your stresses with and find time to, connect with. So it's like a perfect little recipe for breakdown.
Yes, indeed. And it's, quote, always been that way. And it's doing nothing but getting accelerated by, our super hyped up world, thanks to the internet. I mean, it's a wonderful thing, but I mean, it has just, cut, I remember the day when lawyers would tell me that, they would dictate a letter and then it would take a day for their secretary to type the letter and get the letter out and take a couple of days. I mean, literally one task could take a week.
Right.
And now we're 10xing that or 20xing that every single day.
Yes.
And, I believe, and I'm sure you have thoughts on, that our brains are just not equipped to move at this pace on a sustainable, it's not sustainable.
No, it's not. And, my theory on this, just I guess in general, is less is more. I think, if we were to somehow find a structure and, I don't know if we want to go down this road, but I really think this billable hour thing, it's part of the problem, because if you're selling your time and you're, that's a huge, part of this nasty recipe, and what if we got away from that and we just focused on less clients and less of the back and forth communication that had this time element in it, where if you didn't respond within a certain amount of time, everything falls to pieces. It's like this pressure cooker that's unattainable. And I feel like there is some space for some new movement around policies and regulations around the time management or billable hours, and allowing attorneys to do better quality with less clients. And there's some movement there.
Well, and of course, I mean, I hear you and I don't disagree, but I can see myself sitting in a law firm conference room and immediately, if you were to say that into a group of likely white men, they would say, yeah, but how are you gonna generate an income like that? Less clients. We have to do da 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 da. Which in my view, it's contrived.
Right. And that's always this is how it's always been done. I think that my argument for needing women in leadership and law is that we are visionaries, and we don't need that this is the way it's always been done. I mean, we are able to think collaboratively about the whole holistic approach to the system and what are some creative solutions to it. And I don't know if that's where we want to go with this discussion, but my model that I used when I was practicing was a flat fee for certain services. It took the unknown out for the clients and for myself, with specific boundaries in there about communication and different phases throughout the litigation or for the case. I mean, it worked really well for me and for my clients, and I was able to way better job and have a lot less stress in my life. But I get what you're saying, and I don't have the solution. I just think it's a topic we need to be having in the legal profession, in conjunction with bringing microdoses of balance and health and wellness, so that we're all not living in this black or white pressure cooker thinking, and we can start all thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great conduit point, Alicia, when you mentioned about the 4 pillars of avoiding burnout. Can you share more about that with our listeners?
Yes. So I for what the when I teach in my workshops, and I work on this with specific clients. We talk about the what do you need in your life to make sure that that you are in you're not heading towards burnout. And it's an assessment that allows you to go through an assessment of the 4 pillars. And so there's wellness, health and wellness. There's that's one of them. And there's work life, and there's relationships, and spirituality. And within that, when you work within those different modalities, and then you come up with a list of non-negotiables that is your foundation that you are going to integrate into your life on a daily, weekly basis, and putting yourself in your own calendar. Because in the high pressure practice of law, your time is not your own once you hit that. Once you hit that office or pick up your email on your phone. So you have to put yourself into the calendar with these non-negotiables as the foundation to make sure that your pillars are intact. And it's a process that allows you to go through, and you create your own, like, what does health and wellness look like for you? Where encompassing in that is mental, emotional, and physical wellness. And then in the health, the work and the life pillar, we're talking about making sure that in your life, it's not just I get up, and the minute I get up, all I'm thinking about is the million things that I have to do that day, and I pick up my phone, and then it's basically stress. And you're not thinking, there's nothing in your life that is challenging you. You don't have any sense of adventure. You don't have anything outside of the crushing weight of the stress. So where is that, okay, is there a trip that you have planned that's going to push you a little bit outside of your comfort zone? Where's your sense of adventure, your sense of discovery? And then also, where is your work? This one's a lot. We spend a lot of time in the work and creating boundaries around, okay, so that means your phone isn't right by your bed. These are the little hacks that you can do. Make sure that it's not accessible right when you get up. Put it over so you have to step out of bed to turn the alarm off, and it gives you that 30 seconds to think about anything but that email. Or with the boundaries with client communication, when will you pick up that phone and talk back to your clients? So there's that one. And then within relationships, this is relationship to self, making sure that you are taking care of yourself, your romantic, your intimate partner relationship, because that is extremely important to keep you grounded and not burning out. Your family relationships, your close friends relationships, and your professional relationships. And making sure that when you start to feel out of alignment, and we go through, what does that feel like? That feels like I'm not sleeping well, I'm eating too much, I'm eating too little, I'm drinking way too much every night, I've had a cold and it's not going away. These are little ways to tell that you're out of alignment. And then you go in here and you go, gosh, I need to, which one of my pillars is off? And then I talk about spirituality, and I know some people might balk at that, but I don't mean everybody has to go to church, have a religion. It means making sure that you have a connection that's bigger than you, a belief that something bigger than you. And that can be God, it can be Allah, it can be nature, it can be the divine, it can be you believe in humanity, and making sure that you connect to whatever it is that's bigger than you as much as possible, because a lot of the pressure in this space comes from everything's riding on your shoulders, and there's nobody else can fix this problem but you. So I truly believe that is a piece of this puzzle that we do need to start talking about. And it's difficult. Sometimes it can be difficult to have these discussions, but I believe it's important.
Well, and when you bring these two, and they absolutely are, and they're genius how you have categoried and segmented them, all for, that we're not just one, we don't fit into one box. There's so many, we're multidimensional.
Yes.
So when you bring these to your clients, do you receive a little bit of resistance? Or for folks who are really suffering, we know in legal services, they have, there's a high level of substance abuse, depression, anxiety, suicide, divorce. So when people are hurting and their lives are suffering, and you bring about these 4 pillars, I'd be curious to understand and learn more about, as a practical matter, how do they respond to these 4 pillars and the work and the initiatives that you lay out before them?
When people are in pain and hopeless and suffering, sometimes it just feels like a cup of water in a desert. And so there's a lot of relief, and there's a lot of feeling like, oh my gosh, now there's structure. And now, because I feel like, okay, I know, because for me, when I was drowning, it was like, I just need somebody to give me a model that I can understand. Why do I feel so lost? I know I'm out of control, and not intentionally. It happens so like slowly and subversively, and then all of a sudden I'm not in control anymore, right? And so I just need somebody to kind of give me a blueprint. And so that's what this is. And so there's a lot of relief. And I like to do it because it's super practical and pragmatic, and you work within each modalities, and it's very personal and tangible, like kinesthetic, like you're actually going through. And it's a way to have people journal without really actually knowing that you're journaling, because you're going through it like a workbook. And so it is nice and clarifying, and there's so much clarity. Now, I'll have to say, there's one thing that is unique in my approach that I don't know that anybody else is talking about this, but now if you're, say, somebody who's dealing with, you're hearing divorce after divorce, and, especially maybe something about domestic violence, let's just say underbellies, and you can't fix the problem. The drinking and the depression or the drugs and the anxiety and the divorce, basically people saying, I don't recognize this person anymore. They're not the same person. There's like a disconnect, a disassociation. It really is a disassociating from, it's a spiritual crisis that happens. I cannot help anymore. I am disassociating from the fact that I want to help so badly. I cannot help anymore. I've had to compartmentalize myself, and I can't do that anymore. So it's like a fracturing that occurs. And so part of this work is bringing them back together, so they don't feel like they are just a bunch of fractured pieces or boxes all over, and they can see themselves as a whole person again. And that's why I love this work.
That is so incredibly transformative.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fascinated to learn about how you combine neuroscience, psychology, mindfulness, self-development, and practical knowledge of the law to help lawyers in tangible ways transform the way they treat themselves, hopefully with much more kindness in their clients and the law. Can you speak to that for us, Alicia?
Yes, so my background, I have a degree in neuroscience and psychology. And so I'm a huge neuroscience nerd. It just is right up my alley. And so what I love to do is it's one thing to just say, oh, like here's how you fix it. But like let's understand the brain's wiring, the brain chemistry, the why, what happens when you're under this insane amount of pressure, this insane amount of compound trauma and compassion fatigue. Like what is actually happening on a neurochemical, like physical, biological level? And that helps us practical, logical thinkers understand it conceptually. And I love the science behind it. It nerds me out and I love it. And it seems like people really resonated too. And then you can learn the psychology about it, because really we're humans and we're not just this meat body and these like particles. We are humans with, attachment styles and childhoods and families outside, and then you're constantly interacting with other people. So let's understand yourself, how you're wired. I bring in the Enneagram. I love that tool as a way to understand yourself and then also other people. It's a training mechanism, like a personality test. And then I use self-development, and I use that. Basically, that's really for boundaries and moving through places where you feel really stuck and you're like, there's no other way. And then basically that's where I get in there and do the transformative work of, yeah, there's always another way. And A, I'm proof of it. And B, let's tap into self-development for that. And then the practical part is, this is all great, but if I can't help a lawyer understand how to take this in with them when into their office, then it's all for nothing. So this is where it's like, okay, what do you do when you've got back-to-back depositions and you got, a million client calls, a million emails, like the nitty-gritty of like, what does a day in the life of a lawyer look? And I have walked, talked, and breathed that. So I'm able to bring the practical tools into all this. And that's where the transformation really kicks in.
Oh my God, that's so powerful. So incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, I've seen and worked with lawyers for so long inside the law firms and have seen, how they suffer, and they really suffer in silence because has been no outlet. I mean, I've seen in the last year or two where firms sort of creating wellness committees and bringing mindfulness experts in, and that's fantabulous that they have some level of recognition, but it's kind of like you got to cut the fish off at the top of the head. If you're really going to make a long sustaining difference in the lives of people. And so there's not just one, seminar or symposium you can go to and fix it, but it's the day-to-day practice and the disciplines and the mindsets that must be cultivated on a regular basis, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, and I don't think you can, I always love the word, my trigger word or my little buzzword is integrate. Like if you can't take these concepts and integrate them into your life, and that's why that work-life balance, I don't even know about, that's work-life integration and integrating these concepts into your life. It really is all for naught, because you're like, great, I went to this retreat and it was awesome and I felt really relaxed, but then I go to the office on Monday and I'm back to feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack. Right. No, that's not helpful.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, this is phenomenal. I want to ask you one of my favorite questions that I ask all our guests because I find it fascinating, and our listeners do as well. So if you could give, we've all traveled a path to this journey at this juncture. If you could give your younger self one piece of professional advice, what would that be?
I would say relax, trust yourself. You're going to make it because you're you, and you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself. And I 100%, if I could go back to Alicia at 20, when she just felt like there was no other option but just to push, 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 because she had to prove that she was worthy of success, I would be like, girl, you have it in spades. Like, relax. You're going to make it.
You got this, girl.
You got this. Chill out.
I wonder so much. I mean, I I felt very similar at that age, 20, 25, etc.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, I don't remember my parents pressuring me or pushing me. I mean, I was pretty self-motivated. And it would be fascinating that we all come from different places, but it's like, particularly for females,
Yeah.
why are we so hard on ourselves? Why? I mean, perhaps it's the media, the society, for this, trying to achieve this quote figure or visualization of perfection, which of course is an illusion. But how many lives are broken trying to, attain this level of perfection? And it's so counterproductive, but it's so destructive.
I want to just say a huge amen to that. And I consider myself a recovering perfectionist, and sometimes I'm in step 12 and sometimes I'm in step 10 or 8, and I slide back to 2. But I think that has been the most harmful part of my personal journey, has been this fear of not being perfect, and it's caused so much undue stress. But then again, I'm in this amazing women in leadership program this year, and a cohort, and we just had a speaker on it, and on failure and the interplay between women and career progression and leadership, and this interplay between needing to be perfect and not progressing like men do, because we feel like we have to be perfect in order to deserve to be in leadership or be an expert, or go for that next thing. And it not only is destructive to our mind, body, spirit health, it's also destructive to us progressing in our careers and in leadership. It's a nasty thing that plagues us. And I think it does come from there's something subversive that's implanted as you as a girl, that you aren't allowed to go get messy and play and just kind of, oh well, here's a boy. It's like, no, there's something different that girls are looked at, and they're oh, okay, so now I've got a dog in here. So we're gonna probably cut that out.
Okay, thank you.
Lola.
It's good to have your pet to work day.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
She loves you.
Yes, she loves me. So I don't know where to pick up on that one again.
No, well, it is. It is subversive. I mean, there's all kinds of science that shows us that, and this kind of touches my work in working with women, high achieving women, and their lack of confidence, even though they're highly accomplished and highly credentialed. And that is, we're all born, male and females are born with the same level of confidence. But when we as females reach the age of puberty, something happens hormonally and biologically that we turn ourselves inside out to appeal to males if we're of that persuasion. And so all of our confidence just goes away. And so that's when we become self-conscious. That's when we become Eve in the garden, and we realize that we're naked, but it was so pure before then, and then after then. And then the society in general doesn't have the tools to help us get back on track, to realize that this is just normal and healthy and natural for who we are, and to embrace that. But instead we fight it because the media and, all the media and all the information outlets push this illusory vision and perception of what, quote, the perfect woman should be like. And none of us are that, because we're all perfect in our own way. But, the box has been so narrow for so long. Barbie has always been white and skinny.
Yes.
Right? And so that's a lot of what I'm so passionate about, because, so many women that I've worked with and coached with over decades, that they're so capable and they're so just perfect as they are. And they, they're the the Debbie Doubter and the imposter syndrome and the inner critic, and they have failure and fear of failure all over the place, and all kinds of fear of rejection and perfectionism and the disease to please, and I could go on and on and on. And
Yes.
it's like, girl, you are perfect just the way you are. You've got to learn to embrace that. And it is, we take them through almost like a 12-step program to move to that. But it really takes a lot of self-assessment and reflection and looking at our environment, not only our childhood environment, but the work environment and our personal relationships, etc. Because what I say is, fear of failure and all the fears that we have, they're not terminal. Once we recognize them, they lose their power. And so we can move on and be and embrace who, source God wanted us and, wanted us to be. And so, then I see our work very closely aligned.
Yes. I love that. And it's really interesting because I think another reason women leave the law is because the law, it's an unattainable perfect standard. Like you cannot be perfect in the law. Like it's just not available.
It's not real.
And it's not real. And that is really challenging, I think, for women. That model too is like, because they're especially high achieving type A women, we have, and I'll put myself in that category, is like we have this need for perfection. It's driven us, it's actually pushed us to succeed, but then something happens once we achieve it in law specifically, and I'm sure that it happens in the medical profession and others as well, but the law and legal, it's unattainable. And so it's almost like, I can't do this. Right. So I'm going to leave. And that's like the opposite of really what we need. But yes, I'm sure we could go on and on about this for a while.
It's the big black hole. You can never ever feel it. So I want to be respectful to our listeners, and this has been so mind expansive, and I know it's just so full of wonderful, uplifting information for our listeners and things that I know you and I, Alicia, are so passionate about and what drives us and gets us up every day. But so I want to share with our listeners your accessibility. So I would love for you to share with them about how how they can connect with you. What's the best way to connect with you, and any of the resources that you can, offer to them through whether your digital assets or otherwise.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook at Alicia Journey, Instagram at The Attorney Journey. My website is aliciajourney.com, and my contact information is on there, and I'm always open for getting direct messages. Also, I'm going to provide your listeners with a free downloadable PDF of these 4 pillars, and basically a mini worksheet that they can go through and plug in their non-negotiables and their foundations into these pillars to get them started in this assessment.
Wonderful. That's so generous of you. Thank you very much. So listeners, you heard it here. Alicia is going to provide to all of us a PDF that's going to help us, jumpstart our path back to wellness and back to ourselves. So this wraps up another episode of the Secret Sauce Marketing Tastings podcast. Certainly, my life's work is working with professional services providers, lawyers included, and others as well, engineers, accountants, financial planning providers, to help them build, grow, and sustain a prosperous business. And we know for sure you cannot sustain a prosperous business if we are leaking of our self-worth and all of the tools that we must have to thrive and prosper on a personal and spiritual level. So I see it as you say, to take your word, Alicia, integrative approach. And so that's something that really makes my heart sing. But thank you again, Alicia Journey, for joining us today. And thank you, listeners. And, listen to us wherever you find your podcasts.